In this video, after leveling the lathe, I'll do my first test cuts. This will be over 6 inches with no tailstock. So I'm off over 1/1000 of an inch over 6 inches. I made slight leveling adjustments at the tail end of the lathe, and it's surprising how much difference it makes, just the slightest movement. I spent about an hour adjusting the level and making new cuts, and I finally got it down to about 3/10,000ths of an inch. Now I'm going to fine-tune the tailstock. Here I'm using the MT5 adapter to MT3 taper that came with the lathe. I ordered the Edge Technologies tailstock alignment tool. The ends are precision ground to the exact same diameter. Sorry about the camera angle on the dial indicator. It looks like I'm about 1/1000ths off on the tailstock. I'm going to go back and double check. It looks like that's correct. It's about 1/1000ths off. There's set screws on each side of the tailstock on the back end. To make the adjustment you loosen one set screw and then go to the opposite side and tighten the other set screw, depending on which way you want to move the tailstock. I forgot about the pivot pin that's at the front of the tailstock. So if you move the rear of the tailstock to the right, the front of the tailstock is going to go to the left. Once you get the dial indicator where you want it, you have to tighten the set screw that you loosened. So both set screws have to be tight, and then check the dial indicator to make sure it hasn't moved. I'm not using the follower to make these cuts. I was using it earlier to hog off the material between where I'm going to make my test cuts. I sped the video up to get through these cuts. So it looks like I have perfect alignment. I'm going to try something different now. This is a 6mm gauge pin mounted in a ER32 collet. The 4-jaw chuck won't go small enough to grab onto the 6mm gauge pin, so I'm using a collet adapter. The centering scope uses a 6mm mount. It's really designed for using on a mill for alignment at a closer range. I have it focused on the tip of the dead center mounted in the tailstock. It's almost like looking at the dead center with a microscope. The developer of the scope suggested that I use a zoom lens on the camera to do long distance measuring. He sent me a link where I could purchase the lens. I know that I got a good alignment with the Edge Industries tailstock alignment tool, and it's 12 inches long. So I want to see if the alignment holds true from 12 inches all the way to the end of the lathe bed. So here's the alignment at 12 inches. It's right on target with the centering scope. Now I'll move the tailstock all the way to the end of the lathe bed. There's a focus ring on the lens, so I need to adjust it to bring the camera into focus. So it looks like I still have a good alignment all the way to the end of the lathe bed. Now I can start on my first project with the new lathe. To use the carriage lock on the new lathe, you have to use an Allen wrench. It just pinches up against the flat area on the bottom of the ways. The lathe came with this lever, and I have no idea where it goes. I've looked everywhere, but the threads are the same as the locking block. It's just not long enough. So this is what the lever looks like when it's disassembled. It's spring loaded, so you can lift up on the lever and then reposition it back down on the hex head. So I'm going to use the Allen head bolt that came with the lathe for the carriage lock and cut a hex head on it so it matches the hex head that's on the lever. I don't have any metric hex head bolts, so I'll just make do with this one. I calculated that I need to take 32 thousandths off each side to match the hex head that's in the lever. I didn't want to take a chance on undercutting the head, so I stopped at 30 thousandths and then test fit the lever and made small cuts until it fit tight. I drilled and tapped the bolt for 1024 threads. I had some shoulder bolts that were left over from another project that were a 1/4 inch in diameter and 1/2 inch long with 1024 threads. The problem is the diameter of the head is too large for the lever handle, so I had to mount it in the lathe and cut it down. You can see how long the hex head is for the original bolt that was in the lever, so I need to make a spacer to make up for that difference on the new bolt. So here's the new bolt with the spacer and the shoulder bolt compared to the original hex head bolt for the lever. I cut a little bit off of the bottom of the lever to give it a lower profile and had to make a few other small adjustments. So now you can use the lever to lock the carriage, and if you need to, you can lift up on the lever and reposition it on the hex head. I've already started on another new project, so stay tuned.